Hello, everyone. Welcome to Money, Sex, and God. This is Genevieve, and I am really excited to dive into some really juicy, really needed, really necessary topics tonight. Things that not everyone's talking about. And so I brought on an expert in the field to be able to speak with us on these things. But before I go into introducing her, I just want to remind you, first of all, if you're watching, no matter where you're watching from, make sure to type in where you're watching from. Let us know if you're watching the replay. Share this with your friends. Share this in your business groups. We're going to be talking butt plugs for business. Excuse me. Everyone needs to watch this. It's super important that you all hear this information. And also, most of you are already in the self-pleasure challenge. There's about 2,000 of you, but in case any of you are not yet in there, we started today. I'm like, how long has today been? We started today and we're going for the next 3 days. So make sure to jump in. I'll post the link below. If you're not already in, it's my gift to you, all about how to embody the tools that we're talking about on Money, Sex, and God each week, and use this interview as something that's going to support you to go deeper into the practices and the tools that we're learning there. This is going to be something really yummy for you. So now that my spiel is done, I am so excited to introduce a somatic sexologist, right? And the founder of the Institute of New Paradigm Intimacy, right? All the way in Australia on the other side of the world. I always get so excited when there's sexuality educators that I really respect. Like I can tell just by like you're inhabiting your being and how your energy lays in your body that the work that you do is solid and really like your shit, right? And I get so excited when I see someone on the other side of the world doing it. I'm like, great, I don't have to go over there. You can stay there, you rock it out. We can like tackle both poles and make sure everyone gets to open up to what's possible. So tell us a little bit about yourself. I just want to go ahead and introduce Victoria Redbard. If you guys know her, say hi. If you don't, say hi anyway. And Victoria, tell us a little bit about like, what was your journey from, getting to be a sexuality educator and open up this institute? How did that come through to your being? How did you get to do that?
That's interesting that you asked that. I like the way you worded the question. I was talking to a friend of mine this morning, and he was like, you birth things through your life force, and that's how things are created in your world. And so when your life force is there, or when it's not, it's like you can feel it. And I was like, oh yeah, I actually recognize that in me. And it's like, a lot of this, this, where you can be from is sort of like this place of like will, and like creation. And then there's like this other place. It's almost like divine will, it's kind of like, it's like breathing through it, and it's kind of like bubbling up, and it's like vibrating into the world. And yeah, there's something about like this refining process into that space of how things are starting to birth through me, and how like the best things that I've ever birthed, which is one of them, is the Institute of New Paradigm Intimacy, has definitely been from that place of like vibration and listening. It's like it comes, and I almost like describe it as it's coming from like below sexuality. So I use like the word eros to describe that place of like that like life instinct. It's like the place where we breathe from, or where we're feeling that hunger from, or that desire. It's like where that energy comes from. And that's before, and like I feel when it comes into sexuality, it gets kind of polarized. It gets a bit more like either masculine, I'm going to go and do the thing, or feminine. It's like, and it's also like the polarity we feel in sexuality. It's like when we feel like like that buzzing of our eros exists before we start to project it onto a person that we desire, or we start to feel where it feels drawn to. It's like that energy exists there. And I believe that's creation point, because we can start to actually, that's where creativity comes from too. So yeah, like how I came to come on this journey has been like really tracking that part of me, and tracking that eros. And that really stems into the stuff with self-pleasure as well, which I'm loving that you've created a challenge, because I feel like everybody should get connected to their self-pleasure.
Yeah. I really think it can shift the entire, right? That's why I'm so excited. I'm like, you take Australia, right? Like literally the energy that's exuded from self-pleasure can shift massive like global change. And I have a feeling you're feeling the same thing of what's there and what's possible. When people wake up who they are. Yeah.
Totally. I mean, there's such a big difference between like masturbation and self-pleasure.
Yeah.
Like for me, masturbation is this idea that we're going to like drop into the body, and we're going to use like friction-based touch to create stimulation and feel arousal, pleasure, and orgasm. Whereas
Yeah.
self-pleasure for me is like we're going into the body and we're just going, okay, well, what wants to happen now?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we listen to that? And when we start to listen to that, there's something that comes through. It's like a clarity. It's like if you've ever like been thinking about something while you're kind of moving your hands and making sound and using all these other tools, it's like this clarity just comes in. And really, this is one of the ways that I feel to connect to Eros as well. It's like when you want to drop below all the polarity of sexuality, all the taboo and all the things and stuff that's like stuck to sexuality right now in the collective, it's just laying in our Eros. And that's like the place of like erotic innocence that we want to start tracking. And when we're connected to our erotic innocence and we're clearing everything that's in the way of our Eros, that's when we have access to our creativity, to our our desire to live, like to jump out of bed in the morning. It's all coming from that place. And people that don't experience that are often experiencing like a lot of conditioning and a lot of like pain and trauma and stuff that's in the way of of their Eros, so like their life force energy.
Yeah, totally agreeing on all points. And I'm curious, when you speak about new paradigm intimacy, is this what you're speaking of? This like this level of innocence where the all the other like the overlays are kind of dismantled, or is it something else?
Yeah, it's everything for me. It's like, for me, new paradigm intimacy goes across all the things, like, and like, it seems like your favorite topics too, right? Like sex, money, business, all these experiences. It's like, like there's a current of electricity that's available to us. And when we have an intimacy with that and that current inside of ourselves, we can start to feel it inside of others. We can start to feel it in the pulse of business. We can feel it in the pulse of money.
Mm.
And so then we know when to invest in something when it's financial. We know when to scale something when it's business, and we know when to pull it back and hold it when it's like a idea that's percolating. And the same thing with relationships. It's like, how do we move from this place of no labels and like really just moving with the current of where love wants to move in that moment. And that's not like, when people hear that, they sort of go into these ideas of like, oh, that sounds like a lack of commitment, or it sounds really wild. And it's like, it's not wild. It's just actually just like, it's like breathing, it's like, how can you just move with whatever the pulse is in that, in that, and it doesn't take away from any, commitment or reverence or devotion or any of those energies. In fact, like that's where those energies really lie for me. And that's where I feel like most of my devotion to my business, to I don't want to even say money. I want to say like wealth. It's like the health underneath that. It's like the vibration of abundance, I guess, and that experience of moving with love in that way with partners and with people that I care about.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that. And it has me thinking about I'm in a partnership right now, and we're gonna get married, like lifelong partnership. And the way that we came to that conclusion was like literally both of us through our own practices woke up to who we were first, right? I'm sure that you'll relate to this. And so we knew already, like, okay, I don't need to fall into any boxes. I don't need to be this or that or this to be love or receive love, or sex doesn't have to be me doing this and you doing this. And all the polarities of masculine, feminine, giving, receiving, dominant, submissive got to just, right? And then when we finally met each other, we were like, oh, hey, right? And it was like really, really easy. And that's what just continues to happen. That's where we're like, there's no reason not to be committed to this, because there's no way you could fail when it's literally just love right there. And there's nothing else, And I'm curious your thoughts on this. I see so many people in relationship or striving for relationship, and they're still playing in the space of how to do it right or how to be better. Right. And what would you say to them? Like that, I remember like this feeling of, before I found this way of life of relating and love partnership, it was so much about like, how do I be a better woman, was what kept coming up for me. Like be the perfect woman so that someone could love me, right? Is what I kept feeling. What would you give those people that might be playing in that space right now?
First word that comes up is surrender. And it's like that surrendered experience inside of ourselves. So it's like this, I guess it's similar to what I was just linking in the first part of this call. It's like, what is that difference between will and willpower and willing something to happen and making something happen? And then there's this space of like divine will, right? And it's just like this dropping. And it's, yeah, it's just like so much softer. It's like, yeah, I mean, again, it keeps coming back to embodiment again. It's like, how much can we meet the sensations in our body and allow them to vibrate with it? I thought it was really interesting what you just shared about, you know, like we can't fail because it's just love. And it's like, I hear you in that. And I think like people would be listening that haven't got that connection to that, be like, well, that doesn't make sense to me. And like what I would share with that, with those, for those people is, you know, it is what I was sharing about that connection to our current, to our eros. Like when when we start to feel like things are not going right. And I've totally experienced that in business. You know, I'm like, oh, how come things aren't working right now? And it is when I'm like disconnected from that current, like there's things in the way, there's like vulnerabilities that want to be felt, there's ideas, and it's usually based in conditioning. It's like ideas of how things need to be. You know what I mean? Like it's like, okay, well, this is what people need to hear to buy the thing, or this is what people want to feel from me, you know, and this is what this is what's happening. And it's like the moment that I, you know, actually just come back to the authenticity of what it means to be human and know that I'm not going to get it right, and you know, just actually allow that to be and soften into that and surrender into that inside of myself. It's like that's when you create the space. So for those people that are wanting to fall in love or meet a partner, it's the same piece. It's like the moment you stop thinking you need to be a certain kind of woman or a certain kind of partner to have the relationship you want, that's when the relationship will come through, you know. And that's been a very similar, yeah, it's been an interesting process for myself to go, wow, like what I want is so far-fetched, you know. It's like because I haven't seen anyone else have what I have in my relationship style, you know. It's like I don't believe in labels really. Like I don't really play in that space. I don't really, you know, journey with like monogamy or polyamory or any of that. It's just like, how can I, you know, stay connected to that current? And like, and that's really where I was having that conversation of like, really, there's so much devotion, commitment, loyalty, all those energies inside of my relating. And yeah, I don't need to put any particular label on it. And I think that's really what I've really been wanting the whole time, is like that connection to love that feels like truth in every single moment. It's like very alive.
Right, right. And what if, you know, the commitment is to that rather than any of the identities, right? It's the commitment is to just like remembrance and truth rather than in any of the identities of boxes of, well, here's the expectations and here's how we fit into these, right? My experience is that it starts to smush life force, like it just it just contracts it down, and then like people aren't feeling themselves anymore, right? Of course you're not. Your life force isn't flowing through you. You can't feel your essence, you know.
Yeah. And I think that's it. Like that's kind of like if we go into like that's what a soul relationship would look like, you know. Because like our souls don't really have an identity.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of that ideas of like, okay, if I show up like this and then you do that, then that's how we'll relate and that's how we'll be to each other. It's like the mind is just trying to find somewhere to hang on to an identity all the time.
Yes. Right.
And like that life force actually lives beyond identity, like that current that we're both speaking of, that like that I'm like that really, it feels like a really big breath of fresh air, you know. And it's just like that experience of just like being awake and being alive that lives way beyond identity. So to be having that experience is like we really deeply need to be in our bodies, because it's the mind that's actually driving a lot of those thoughts that we need to have labels and need to have things in boxes and have things a certain way. So to be able to do that, I think like we're both, you know, sharing a similar message of this piece around self-pleasure. Because when you're living from the body in that way, it's like, and the self-pleasure is the access point to that, things will start to, you can live from that place a lot easier.
Yeah. Yeah. And that doesn't, and I just want to reiterate that this doesn't mean to be non-committal, right? Because one of the things I see in business creation and in relationship creation is like, I'm just going to live with the flow and the essence, right? And so there's a lack of the commitment of the devotional energy to whatever's being created, right? And I see this a lot with business. That I'm just going to be in that space constantly, just lie around in it, right? And I would assume, and tell me about it, like, but I would assume, at least for me, there's I feel it and then I commit and I trust it and I go deeply into whatever that thing is, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you're speaking of something that's really alive right now for me, because there's like there's all these conversations right in the world at the moment, because we've seen like, you know, the very masculine way of doing things in business. It's like go, 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 like intensity, like burnout to the point or whatever. Right?
Yeah.
Like we're seeing that in the collective. We're like, cool, that doesn't work anymore. Like this whole like COVID awakening, I'm like to call it, is like creating that. It's like people going, okay, well, that's not the way anymore. What's the way? And so then there's this polarity that's playing out where people go, if that's not the way, then it's like super spiritual and super feminine and really yin energy and like moving with the flow and going slow and blah, blah, blah. And I think that's bullshit personally. I feel like it's actually like an integration of that energy that we've seen with the push, and the integration of that yin energy that's like backing it, you know what I mean? And that feminine flow that's backing with that. So I feel like they need to come together to create this middle path for us to actually have business and life and romance and all those things that we want to be experiencing to come into some sort of solidity on the planet. It's like they need to come together. We don't need to like polarize in one or the other. It's just like how can we get it all to come together?
Yeah.
And that's the same inside of ourselves as well, which is again what we're creating in self-pleasure, is like that union inside of our own masculine and feminine side of us.
Right, right. So that you can operate from being a whole being rather than, my experience before this integration happened, which for me, it happened through my own self-pleasure practice, which is why I'm like self-pleasure, everyone, all the people. But that's where I found, like, I felt it, I was like, oh my God, what have I've been like ignoring half of me for a very long time. That union, like, otherwise we're kind of compartmentalized, right? And we're kind of like, everything's kind of fractioned off, and creating business, creating relationship, creating anything, without that realizing your whole body, like who you fully are, which is, I love that you were saying, like, without labels, the essence, without labels, without anything, right? That's what allows for like creation to show up on the planet, right? Like that's makes sense if you think about it, like the union of the whole thing will create something, right? I love that. And that, I'm curious about kind of your experience with it. I love like the stories of how people come to realize these things, because I don't know, for me, I had to like fall flat on my face a few million times and like really get like before I realized it. So I'm curious, like, because I also know there's tons of people watching that are like, yeah, that's great and all, but like, this is where I am right now. I have no money, and like, I want to create this thing, or I want to have this partnership, and self-pleasure, and it just feels boring, or it feels like whatever. It just like they're in that space. And so they may feel an impossibility. And so I'm curious, like, what your journey was, to unveil this about yourself and to get to that space. Yeah.
I like the word impossibility. That's what it always feels like, right? And actually, if you're at that stage on your journey right now and you're feeling that feeling of like, this is never going to work, like like I am so broke and I have like nothing and all that kind of stuff, like that is actually the point of creation. Right? If we want to talk about point of creation, it's the nothingness. Like when you have nothing, when you've hit rock bottom, that is where creation really begins. And that's on that, because it's a point of like it's a point of, yeah, it's like the nothingness is where everything arises from. And that's when, like, and if you're feeling that feeling of chaos that's spinning around your life, it's like, can you drop even deeper into the nothingness that lies within inside of that chaos? And that's really what self-pleasure is about for me as well. It's like, how do we go deeper into the nothingness? And the more and more chaos there is, it's like almost like the more nothingness there is at the same time.
Totally.
Yeah. So yeah, that's been my own journey, and like I don't even know which one to share, like I've had so many points of like, this is fucking impossible and I hate everything about this, and what is even happening, what's even going on, because it's like that's actually the journey in itself. Like it doesn't matter how many cycles of like, all this stuff, like relationships and devotion and love and abundance and all that sort of stuff. It's not a point that you hit. It's like a vibration. It's a feeling inside of your body, really. Yes. So it's like, even like success is a great one to use. It's like that feeling of success. It's like it's actually just a momentary experience, and that moment can last longer sometimes, and sometimes it won't. You can have everything that you wanted and you don't have it at all. So my relationship to that is just watching the ongoing unfolding of it, really. And I have many moments when I'm feeling like, oh, I've got like, this is nothing. I have the nothingness again. and I have like the complete opposite to what would feel like success and abundance.
Yeah. And I love that you said it's also the chaos is also the nothingness. So when we're in the nothingness, right? I talk about nothingness constantly. Like I could totally, I'm so glad that you're in here, because people that know me are like, oh my God, there we go talking about nothingness. That when you're in the nothingness, you're also in infinite possibility and like mass creation and like that availability, right? Of like, oh my gosh, actually everything's available right now. Everything, absolutely everything. Right. And you're not stuck into like, oh, we have to go in this direction, because it's just completely open. Right. And I love, so let's say someone's in nothingness, right? Like, let's say someone's in this nothing space and they're feeling that. Where do they go next? What's the next space that they're going to run into? Is it going to be, okay, let me sit down and create a business plan? Is it going to be, let me self-pleasure? Is it going to be, let me do something? I don't know. Like, what would you do? Like, once you're like, okay, I've hit that space, then what would you bring as next energetically for them to create, being to create?
Destruction. Yeah, first, like when everything's spinning, it's like actually sometimes destruction is the way to go. It's just like break something down, like, crack a thing through this, you know what I mean? Like when there's like sometimes just like, because I want to talk about destruction, I might clean destruction, there's like, because there's the self-destruction, the self-sabotage, and the like taking too many things on and like having all these things that aren't really working around you all the time. And then there's and then there's this place where you can just like slice through, and that looks like a lot of like, okay, what needs to be, like, what can I let go? Because you're looking to create a space, and what you're already doing is just creating like a bubble of awareness around the thing itself, because it's actually just a feeling, right? A lot of that like self-sabotage that we're doing is actually usually just shame or like ideas or beliefs and all that kind of stuff. So what we're doing is just trying to create a bubble around that. And sometimes self-pleasure, like I want to say self-pleasure is the place to go, but like sometimes there's things that need to be done in the real world as well. So I think real world talk is like, let's create some destruction, let's let some things go, let's break some space to make that happen. Because when things are already going wrong, it's like you don't need to salvage anything. You actually probably sometimes just need to destruct more and just like really just like go, okay, well, something's not working, something has to give, and what's that going to be? So we just make the space for something to give, and then we create the space for self-pleasure. Because it's not until you've created enough like awareness around, like a bubble of space around that you're actually going to start to feel the thing. Yeah, that's really that's my belief of like what we need to do is like the first step is like, stop trying to save everything, stop trying to make everything
gripping
work. Don't hold on. Like again, it's like surrender. It's just like, okay, let it go. Hey, come back. And like I'm just touching my womb right now. It's like that's the place. It's like, okay, come back, come back here. And come back into your body and come back into breath. And the body is an interesting game. It's like, how do we inhabit our body in the fullest way possible? And that's really what I work with the self-pleasure modality that I've created as well for the Institute. It's like, tracking the thought, the emotion, the feeling, the sensation. Come into the sensation, then talk to the sensation, not with words, but with the language of the body. So it's like sound, breath, movement, touch. Connect to those feelings of the sensation. And it's like when we bring everything back down to that tiny little microcosm, the macrocosm will change. It's just science, it's just the way it goes.
Yeah, totally. I want everyone to make sure they heard that. Like this is something that people forget a lot. They go and they try to change the external, right? And I love hearing you say like, sometimes the external needs, there's things that are obviously like let go, like destruct, right?
Totally.
And then coming back into the microcosm, like that effect, right? That effect, I see so many people seeking and gripping outside of themselves instead of like, how can I just come back home, right? And recreate what wants to be created inside of me, which will perpetuate an external reality that I desire, right? And I love that you're like hearing that you do the same. It's funny because I do like the sensations, the emotions, the thoughts, and the feelings, like not knowing your work at all, right? But it's like those are the 4 things that help to dissolve charge. So it totally makes sense, right? And so how, if you go like, so let's take it a little bit further here. Like, how will this help create, this practice help create people's desire to be, I mean, I call it superhuman. You said high performance, right? Like that feeling of like, wow, like I can do the impossible. Like, here it is. It's right here. What would you say to that?
Well, again, it keeps coming back to that experience of like the divine will. It's like when you're actually connected to your eros and to your life force energy, it's like you actually only need to push something like this much to make a massive impact. Whereas like when you're driving something from this willpower and this place of like, no, like this is really hard, or not even, it's not even the belief that it's really hard. It's actually just like when you're working in this reality in the 3D, you actually do have to push that whole boulder up the fucking hill. Right. But when you're working, like it's like you're just like coming back into the 5D reality, and you're just sort of like, oh, just clear out, just tap a little bit that way, and then everything just unfolds and creates an impact. It's like because you're having a deeper listening. It's like because you actually have the capacity to hear it. Like what my experience is like, yeah, we can't hear it. Yeah, like it's actually no way to hear it, and the world is so busy and it can be so filled with things, even in the the great pause that we are experiencing. It's like the world is still so loud. And so until we create that that nothingness again, that quiet space, that's where creation moves from, that's where life force moves from, that's where huge impact moves from, a place of like just a tiny little bit of action. You know what I mean? And that's really what I feel like this whole conversation I'm seeing in the collective as well, of like the feminine way and blah blah blah. It's like an integrated way would feel like stillness inside of that, and being able to watch the chaos and be involved in the chaos and be in the spin of it all, and also remain the eye of the storm.
Exactly. Yeah, I often talk about like the way that I self pleasure, and especially when I'm creating something new in business and desiring that, like when I feel that something wants to be birthed, I'll go into first creating the vision, right? And like being in that yin energy and feel that softness, like I'm not even creating, that just appears. And then this feeling of like fucking it, almost like an internal fucking it, an internal commitment. And from that fucking it, then I take it into the external world, and I can start to create small little pieces, right? Because the inner masculine in me isn't like rah, right, or whatever that polarity is. I hate those words. Right? Like he's gentler. He's in service to myself, right, and to this vision that's being birthed and created. And so there's just like these things that get to happen, and they're fun and easy and playful and joyful, and that to me is like the biggest piece about business done through tantra, business done through this eros, that it really gets to be that simple. And wealth creation also gets to be that simple, right? It's just that it's not easy because, like you said, people haven't attuned themselves to listen to it yet, right? That hasn't been, there's just like a little dial on the radio. It's like, beep, it's not quite there yet, not quite attuned into what's there. So how does working with butt plugs, right, moving into that conversation, how does working with butt plugs and the energy through the anus and all of that, I mean, I have my ideas, that I'm curious your thoughts about like creation in that space and what's possible there.
Sure. Yeah. So like I designed these butt plugs that I started to work with, because they, a lot of people have these ideas about butt plugs and things like that. It's like it's so tight and contracted, and then you have to like push through something, and it's like this is not my experience with butt plugs in general. It's not my experience with the vibration of the anus. Like the anus has its own pulse almost, and it has its I'm talking like a pulse in like a heartbeat, like we can feel it in certain parts of our body, and the anus has its own one. And like because of a lot of that stuff that I was saying that was clouding our eros, it's like bogging down that current that is alive in us. It creates contractions in the body like everywhere, and the major place that it does contract is inside of the anus. Like the anus is holding on to so much. So if you're feeling like, yeah, I want to surrender, but how do I bloody surrender, like I would say for myself in my own journey that it's been easier to push and like make shit happen than it has been to surrender. Like actually this process of letting go and surrendering is so much harder for me than like driving something uphill. It's just curiosity of being human, right? So this experience of surrendering has come to me as well through the butt plug stuff. It's like journeying with that vibration, that like that and like entering the anus with the butt plug, while staying connected to the vibration and the current that your body is running on, and you're breathing it, and you're not like pushing it in. It's even just like holding it sometimes near the anus is actually just enough to allow the body to start going into surrender.
Yeah.
You don't always need to go inside of it.
Yeah.
But when people do like work with that part of themselves and open to those sphincters that are inside of us that are holding on to so much, it's like it creates an embodied experience of surrender.
Yeah.
And that embodied,
I totally agree. I didn't have the surrender energetic until I allowed anal play to become a part of my daily routine or my regular weekly routine, and finding that. And I remember the first time it happened, I was like, whoa, this is definitely a level of surrender that I didn't know was possible. Like I didn't understand what was possible there. Yeah. And so I'm curious, like I use it a lot now for surrendering, but specifically around wealth, right? And creating wealth through that energy. And I'm curious how that, if that plays out for you.
yeah, totally. Like I've had so many clients that have come to me and gone, oh wow, like just started using the butt plug, and now all of a sudden my wealth resonance seems to be gone. I can actually hold more. So this whole idea of like holding more money and actually like being able to keep more money inside of your container, I guess, of like your energetics. It's like that's a big piece I've been finding with the wealth piece. And that looks like like it's almost like your body actually can reject the wealth, the abundance, because it's like a responsibility, and there is a responsibility that comes onto having money. And so if your body isn't ready for that, then it will just like keep having bills that come up, that keep having fines and things like that just like extract your money from you, because you're not like a vibrational match for that level of wealth. And it sounds really cruel to like share like that, you're not a vibrational match, but it's just like, it's not a bad thing, like it really isn't. It's just like, just observing that part of us that is like, that doesn't want to hold on to that, because there is always a payoff. There's always a payoff when we don't want to hold on to it. So that's a piece. Other thing I want to share as well with the butt plug stuff is like, there's often traumas that are actually causing us to like not be able to hold on to things, or not be able to create the relationships that we want to create. And that there's a vagus nerve that goes all the way from the bottom of the skull all the way down to the bottom of the spine, and that can be accessed through the anus as well. And it's like it's kind of like vagal toning through the anus basically, and it like and when you vibrate that nerve that's going all the way down, it's like it actually releases a lot of anxiety, depression, like traumas that are being held in on a cellular level. So yeah, that's another reason why I feel like the butt plug piece can be really powerful to like really create that letting go. So yeah,
Beautiful.
there's a few things there.
Yeah, I totally am resonating and hearing. I'm just like nodding along, right? I love that. And that just speaks to how true this work is, right? That it doesn't, you and I have never met before. We have completely different training, I'm sure. And the fact that like our truths are the same, right? Like what we've seen in bodies and what we've seen in energetics, like, yes. I mean, it means that this shit works, right? That there's a level of like, yeah, and this is kind of it, right? Like this is kind of the space to play in. There's not really any arguing it when we've seen it happen over and over again for our clients and in our work. And it's really cool to just be like, yes, there it is again happening. So I hope everyone listening is really feeling that there's, it's kind of not debatable. Like it's just kind of like, this is what appears, this is what it is. Yeah. Anything that you want to kind of leave everyone who's watching with, or anything you want them that's kind of just calling to let them know or hear about in this moment?
Yeah, like I guess I'm just attuned to like that struggle inside of it, and then like I'm just feeling that from what you've shared about like people listening and things like that. I'm like, it's not supposed to be easy, and it's not always easy. And it's like our sensuality emerges from that place of like creating that surrender, and you can't force surrender. So yeah, like if you're creating a commitment to surrender and to the softening in the body, it's like just breathe it one moment at a time, and like see what might be polarizing inside of your view of like, oh, it's this way or this way, and then just notice where the middle path might be from there. It's like just drop into, okay, what if I could just be present here right now? What might emerge? That's what I feel to leave it with. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, totally agreeing, right? 100% for anyone listening. That's exactly how I would play with it as well. And I'm so glad that we got to meet, and thank you for doing your work in the world and, just sharing these truths. It's
Yeah.
really important to have. And so anyone can just kind of follow you on Facebook if they want to keep listening and hearing what you're doing. Is that the best way?
Yeah, for sure. And like, I'd love to, like I said, the Institute of New Paradigm Intimacy is like the school where I teach the modality of self-pleasure that I created. And we used to help people step into the space of becoming a sexuality leader with that modality. And so, yeah, if anyone's interested in that, they can just send me a message and I'll send over the syllabus. Yeah, and I would love to connect with anyone on Instagram or Facebook. It's just Victoria Redbard. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Victoria. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'm really happy we got to do this.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks so much for having me. See you soon.
Awesome. Bye.
Bye.